Hello, family and friends of Second Presbyterian Church. I can't wait to hear what you think and what you have to say. This coming Sunday, you are going to be having a congregational conversation following worship. Now, lunch is included, but we need you to make some reservations if you've not done that already. You'll be talking about life at Second Presbyterian in order to help discern what kind of senior pastor God might call here for the next chapter in your life. You know, I love it when I'm talking with churches and I hear members share stories about their life together as they share their dreams. So I look forward to this conversation. Now, if you're not available for this Sunday's conversation, that's okay, because there's another one taking place on Wednesday, July 20th at 7 p.m. Also, we're asking everyone to complete a congregational survey, another way to hear what you have to say. I look forward to learning how God is working in the life of Second Presbyterian Church. So sign up for the conversations and the survey using the links that have been sent in earlier emails. Now this Sunday, I'm preaching on one of the most famous of Jesus' teachings, the Beatitudes, found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. Now, these Beatitudes stirred quite a discussion in our Tuesday morning's men's Bible study. You know, Jesus always has a way of stirring discussions, which is what I love and I think Jesus would love about Bible study. I invite you to read the Beatitudes before this Sunday and see how they speak to you. Try different versions, especially since this is a very familiar text. What I've come to realize is that how you hear these Beatitudes may depend on where you are in your life and on your context in life. I find that to be true when I read any scripture. That when I'm young, they speak to me in one way, and then as I grow older through life experience, they often speak to me in new ways. And I've learned that context matters. If you grow up in a poor village in Africa, you might just hear them differently than someone who grows up on Park Avenue in New York City. This week I was thinking of how they speak in different social contexts. I'm reading the biography of Howard Thurman, who was the great African-American pastor, preacher, and mystic. He is, in my mind, the spiritual and theological father of the civil rights movement. He offers the spiritual fuel for social action, still does. Dr. Thurman grew up in the part of the world where I grew up, in North Florida. He grew up in a time of segregation. He overcame so many obstacles and achieved so much with his life. From his North Florida beginnings, he became a well-known and well-respected preacher, teacher, scholar, and spiritual leader. He was also so innovative. He was way ahead of his times. Decades before it was fashionable, he shared the value of meditation and silence, knowing that God speaks in the silence. He introduced liturgical dance into worship in Boston. In 1944, about 80 years ago, he went to San Francisco to help start the first racially integrated, intercultural, and interfaith church in the United States. The co-pastor was a white Presbyterian minister named Dr. Alfred Fisk. Dr. Fisk and the Presbyterians in that area had a vision to start such a church, and they asked Dr. Thurman to come and help start it, to be a co-pastor. As I thought about Dr. Thurman and his experience as a black man in the segregated South, I wondered how he and other people on the margins might hear the Beatitudes differently than as I do as an old white guy. And I think about how those first disciples were also from a Jewish people who had no power in the Roman Empire. Maybe this is why the gospel seems to grow among people who are poor and lack power. They can relate to the context. I wonder if the disciples heard the Beatitudes in a different way than I've heard them in my own life and context. I'm thinking they heard this as a word of encouragement from Jesus, aimed at those who were not the movers and shakers of their society. Even so, Jesus says they are blessed. They matter to God. That as they go about seeking righteousness, being peacemakers, being merciful, even being persecuted for seeking to live in God's ways, Even as other people may look down on them, they are blessed. They are important to God. I got to thinking about this because of a story Dr. Thurman told in his autobiography. Some of you may have read this story on my Facebook page. He was taking his children back to his childhood home in Daytona Beach, Florida. And they're walking through his old neighborhoods and they see 2 swings at a public school. They tell their dad they'd like to swing on those swing set. He says, "You can't swing on those swings." "Why?" "Well, when we get home and have some cold lemonade, I will tell you," he said. Then he says, when we were home again and had our lemonade, his daughter Ann pressed for the answer. "We're home now, Daddy. Tell us." I said, "It is against the law for us to use those swings, even though it is a public school. At present, only white children can play there. But it takes the state legislature, the courts, the sheriffs, the policemen, the white churches, the mayors, the banks and businesses, and the majority of white people in the state of Florida. It takes all those to keep 2 little black girls from swinging on those swings. That's how important you are. Never forget, the estimate of your own importance and self-worth can be judged by how many weapons and how much power people are willing to use to control you and keep you in place they have assigned to you. You are 2 very important little girls. Your presence can threaten the entire state of Florida." Do you see what Dr. Thurman was doing here? He was letting his children know that it doesn't matter what those in power think. They matter to God. I wonder if that's what the disciples in training heard that day. "Blessed are you when you carry out my mission and people look down on you. Don't worry, you are blessed because you matter to God. And what you do is important to God and to the work of God's kingdom." So may God bless us as we seek to go about following Jesus, even when it is not fashionable, knowing that we are participating in God's mission to bring the kingdom of heaven to this broken and busted world. That while the world may not always value what we do, God does, and God blesses us for it, and that's what matters. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday, if not sooner.